Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Professor B. Hariharan from the Institute of English, University of Kerala. In the course on the Introduction to 20th Century Literature, we will be now looking at the module on Doris Lessing's path-breaking novel, The Golden Notebook. Doris Lessing won the Nobel Prize in 2007. She was a very spirited, vociferous writer. Her notable works include The Grass is Singing in 1950, The Golden Notebook in 1962, The First Child in 1988, Love Again in 1996, and the last book that she published was Alfred and Emily in 2008 after she won the Nobel Prize. Now, her works display an intertwining of the personal and the political. Now, this is something that really stands out in her oeuvre. Let's now look at The Golden Notebook. This is a novel that is considered to be a cult classic. The novel has a fragmentary structure and narration. This has been hailed as a postmodern text because readers and critics say that its mode of narration has captured the spirit, the zeitgeist of the postmodern world. Now, in this novel, Lessing tackles a whole range of issues which include gender politics, racial discrimination, communism, and individual conflict. Now, these four issues are tackled in a very unique fashion. Now, we get an indication of that from the very title of the book itself. Now, we say that this is a novel, but then the title of the book has this term notebook. So, are these notes? What kind of a book is this that we are reading? So, let's try to look in some detail at that. We will look first at the themes and then the structure of this novel. Now, when we do this, there are 6 things to keep in mind. We have to look at the idea of the notebooks, the idea of fragmentation, gender politics, and female bonding and male resistance. Now, this has a lot of importance when we discuss the work of Doris Lessing. Communism and disillusionment, that will certainly bring in the political dimension, and of course, racial discrimination. These are the 6 broad areas that we will be looking at. Okay, now let's look at the notebook. Now, this is the broad frame of the narrative. Now, the notebooks provide this narrative with a wholeness, with artistic unity. The notebooks are a structural device that connects the very many different themes that I had tried to indicate at the very beginning. These 4 notebooks can be read as 4 different codes, if one might want to use that term. There certainly is a very clear color coding here. There are 4 colors. They are black, red, yellow, and blue. These 4 books explore the personality of the main character in this book, Anna Wolf. She has a multifaceted personality. She is an author herself. And so this book tries to talk about these various themes by having a protagonist who is also an author. Now, this is also a book, incidentally, it must be mentioned that this is also a book that has been celebrated as a work championing the cause of feminists and feminism. But then Lessing would maintain that her work does not try to project the war of the sexes. Now, to reduce the novel to in this manner, she feels would limit what the novel is trying to do in terms of its, let's say, theme and politics. Now, it's quite clear that the protagonist, Anna Wolf, becomes in a way an extension of the authorial self, because we find her discussing the travails, the pangs, the anxieties of writing, the angst of being an individual who is very much socially conscious in a world that is robbed of sensitivity, a world which does not react to injustice and things that are unfair, that are things that are happening around you. So it's in this sense that Anna Wolf is located in this novel. Now let's look at these different 4 notebooks. These notebooks kind of talk about different things. Now let us look at that. Now the black notebook records Anna's experiences in Africa. The red notebook is or becomes Anna's political consciousness. The yellow notebook is an extension of her creative self, and the blue notebook is a journal. It's a record of day-to-day life. We have now mentioned 4. Now there is something called the golden notebook. We have talked about these 4. We will look at the gold. What is it that makes the golden notebook? These 4 notebooks become a composite. They become a kind of a melange. Now these notebooks mirror the psyche, the fragmented psyche of the contemporary or the postmodern individual. Now, when we use the image of the mirror, and then when we talk about a fragmented psyche, now think of the effect that it has. There would be further fragmentation. There will not be any cohesiveness, as it were. Now, this is in line with the kind of style that the text seems to generate. The text certainly has a non-linear narrative style, and when we think of this image of the mirror and the fragmented psyche, this is probably the narrative style that the novelist adopts here, and it is further augmented. The linearity in the style of narration is enhanced, one should say, by the excerpts that you have from the book, from the notebooks. Now, they are not complete notebooks. They are all notebooks in the sense that they are fragments, and when you read it, you feel that they are excerpts from some other source. But then we don't go hunting for those sources. Now, these notebooks, in the way in which they are presented to you, sustain the logicality of what could otherwise become a very, very chaotic kind of a narrative. Now, that gives you some kind of an indication of the type of narrative structure that this book has. Gives you an indication of the complexity involved in the narration, the complexity that is there in the way in which Anna Wolf, let us say, or the self of Anna Wolf, let's say, emerges in this book. Now let's look at the notebooks in some detail. We'll begin with the yellow notebook. The yellow notebook constitutes a diegetic level. It talks, or it tells you the story of Ella. Now let us see what happens here. The book adopts a deliberate metafictional strategy, and in the yellow notebook you have Anna who writes Ella's story, and Ella is writing another story. So what is the story that you read? You will be reading Anna, who is writing Ella's story, and you are also reading Ella, who is writing another story. So this is what you are reading in the yellow notebook. Now the blue notebook has newspaper clippings, and when we read these newspaper clippings, what happens is we question the nature of reality itself. The golden notebook, that symbolizes Anna's attempts to regroup her fragmented self. Now, in other words, the golden notebook represents the creative principle. Now, there's something else that I would like to draw your attention to. Now, the yellow notebook also very closely mirrors the events in the main narrative. Now, what Lessing perhaps is trying to do with the metafictional strategy is to see if it is possible to understand something of the therapeutic effect of writing. The golden notebook tries to restore sense out of senselessness and form out of formlessness. Now, the rejuvenation is not immediately released or realized because Anna falls back, but then of course she bounces back. Now the notebooks are now discarded here and at the end of it, Anna peruses them, studies them once again, understands that these books together form an indelible part of her psyche. Now I think we should look at the whole idea of fragmentation. Now Anna's fragmented world is indicative of societal fragmentation. Now this idea of fragmentation at the thematic level is sustained by a non-linear narration, which is indicative of the nature of Lessing's creative world, which is essentially fragmentary. So in this sense, you have all the four notebooks becoming the leitmotif of fragmentation. Now, Anna Wolf emerges at the end of it stronger as she listens to, as she heeds to the cacophony of her divided, diverse selves. Now, I think there is this remarkable way in which all these narratives, all these voices converge or come together, and this is what takes you back to this whole notion of therapy or healing. Now let's get on with the idea of fragmentation. Now Anna embraces the world that is fragmentary and attains awareness which is not there for someone like Tommy, because Tommy is very confused and he is not able to reconcile the multiple selves, these plural selves. Now we have to also keep in mind that his physical blindness is also symbolic of a lack of real or true awareness. Now Tommy is important here because he is a foil to Anna, because whatever Anna is able to do, Tommy fails her, or he cannot do it. Perhaps Tommy is the other, the kind of double of Anna. It might be possible to make an argument like that. We will be now looking at the whole theme, the whole idea of gender politics. This is a novel that is hailed as a feminist text, and we know that And Lessing very famously refuted this argument, saying that this is a novel that describes female emotions. Now, there are these two women here, Anna and Molly, who are empowered in the course of this narrative. Now, Anna, in the course of this narrative, what she is able to do is she is able to write herself. Now, it's in this sense that Anna and Molly, in a way, complete each other and then become empowered women in the narrative. So, it's in this fashion that we can say that Anna and of course Molly refuse to efface their identity or their individuality for others, particularly men who have crossed their lives. Anna and Molly, as I said earlier, are presented here as free women. They are free. Now, what Lessing is trying to do here is to share with the reader, show how the idea of the free women is a normative category in itself. Now, in the process, what the novel is trying to do is to critique the double standards that a patriarchal system or patriarchal society had established as the norm. We must also keep in mind that Lessing is very careful not to portray all gender relations in a negative manner. Now, this is something that we have to say as some kind of a strength in this novel. Coming to another dimension that emerges in the course of reading this book are two concerns that has to do with female bonding and of course male resistance. Now, female bonding is something that is developed in terms of the Anna-Molly relationship, and male resistance in terms of patriarchal structures and patriarchal society. Now, what the book does is to foreground primarily the theme of sisterhood. Now, this could possibly be one reason why Lessing has reservations about calling this novel a feminist text. Now, Anna's relationship with Molly is truly indicative of the faith, the trust and concern that they have for each other. The theme, in that sense, of female bonding is so very central here for Anna to become a balanced individual, and this is one way in which she is able to recognize what self means and through that become Anna. Now, if we understand the emergence of Anna, the emergence of Anna from all those fragments, and then reach this point where we recognize the importance of female bonding here, which is so crucial, we will have to say that Molly and Anna are misfits. They are aberrations in a patriarchal system, that they will find it very difficult to be accepted for what they are. Now, what we have said so far has to do with female bonding. Now, let's look at the male part of it, the other side of it. We have characters like Michael or Richard, who symbolize their dislike, their resentment towards the way in which these two women, let's say, have come together, towards this idea of female bonding. Now, people like Michael and Richard, for instance, look at this female space that is created, carved out, they look at it with a whole lot of antagonism. They try to manipulate women so that they will be able to destroy that friendship. Now, there is then a very clear gender war, as it were, which becomes perhaps ultimately an attempt to exercise control and power. This book, in that sense, comments on what female space creates. Female space creates something for women, but then what does it create for men? Lessing would say that it is suspicion. Now, Lessing seems to be arguing that men cannot comprehend the space that women create. Now, this seems to be what Lessing is saying. Now, this is a position that can be debated, it can be contested, but then let us try to leave it at that point, and this can be taken up later on. Now, there is another area that is of very great concern here that has to do with disillusionment with ideology, particularly communist ideology. Now, Lessing was a Marxist, she was a communist, and like perhaps many intellectuals and writers, she also was disillusioned with communism. Now, this is closely mirrored in the character of Anna, in what Anna has to say, in the discussions that she has with others in the novel. All this is presented here, it's all mirrored in Anna, who expresses her misgivings, her distrust about the ideology of the left. Now, both Anna and Molly in this narrative provide a very insightful critique of the Communist Party. Now, this is very important. It's not a critique or a criticism of communism, but it's a critique of the Communist Party. Now, you have here, in a way, a kind of self-criticism as Anna critiques her own political allegiance. So, the criticism comes from within. Now, this is something that one reads, and it perhaps also helps you to take a very, very balanced view of the discussions that are there in the book about ideology. Now, what Anna does is she analyzes her apathy for party politics, number one. The second thing is that she reasons that this is how she does this. She reasons that the party is losing its grip on popular imagination. Now, this is something that has concerned a whole lot of, let's say, intellectuals or even writers, and Anna here is no exception. Anna also realizes that her comrades, her fellow comrades, are trapped in what she refers to as the constructedness of their political fantasies. In other words, what she is saying is that her fellow comrades have lost touch with grassroots workers and the ground reality that exists in society. So, in a way, what we have is a very trenchant criticism of the phase through which the Communist Party and the comrades are going through. She realizes that her party has now become stagnant, that there is no growth, that it's decaying. There is boredom. It is this boredom because of that stagnancy that leads her to denounce her party and the political ideology which that party was trying to miserably uphold. What the novel also does is to contrast Anna with Jack. We see here Anna reacting against the ossified principle that the party stands for. It's a reaction that when we read it from Anna's side is very well articulated, very well argued. Now let's look at one more dimension in this novel. What we see that the kind of concerns that we have discussed so far are all very, very complex, and to add to that is this very, very sensitive issue of questions of race, racial discrimination. Now Anna talks about her experiences in Africa, and that's what you have in the Black Notebook. The Black Notebook in that sense becomes a record of the racial discrimination that she witnessed in Africa. It may not be a major theme in the novel, but racial tension looms large in the background, and perhaps it might be interesting to read this background and see why she was disillusioned with the Communist Party. Now Anna is not very comfortable with her novel featuring the black experience. We must remember that Anna is a writer, is a novelist. So what we have is the Golden Notebook, in which Anna writes a novel about her African experience, and she is not very comfortable with what she has written there. Fine. Now Anna also at that point, this is a remarkable moment of revelation, because she realizes that she is guilty of objectifying people of color, the Africans, in her work, and she is disturbed by racial discrimination, and she becomes a helpless spectator. Now it's not Anna's word throughout. You have here Lessing contrasting all the fulminations of Anna with a pragmatic approach that Willie propounds. Now racial discrimination is also political, and in that sense Doris Lessing questions the faith or the sincerity of political ideologies which try to adapt or adopt a practical stance. Now let's try to put some of these things together in the form of a conclusion. I think we need to underline the fact that this is a novel that will be very difficult to summarize. What we have tried to do here is to indicate some of the features, some of the things that can be highlighted in the novel. Before we conclude, I would like to say that the shortcut to understand what this book is all about is to read the novel. Now let's try to sum up some of the arguments here. Now the conflicts that are there in the world in which we live are crystallized here. They all come together in this novel. This is a novel that has universal appeal, and perhaps this is why the novel is popular even today. Anna and her world holds up a mirror to not reality, to postmodern reality. I wish you a very good reading experience. Thank you.